Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast show is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. From directors, producers, writers, cinematographers, and of course, costume designers. Designing Hollywood covers some of the most celebrated professionals in the motion picture industry. The show explores the artistry, the craftsmanship, and the stories that bring our favorite motion pictures to life.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Musali, the new president and CEO of Western Costume, welcoming Designing Hollywood back to Western. This is our men's tailor shop, where we're custom making clothes all the time, alterations. This is our women's custom made. We can make anything you guys need us to make, alter anything. We can deck out a full army if you want in our military department. Thank you, Designing Hollywood, for coming in to see Western Costume. Hope to see you soon.
Today on the Designing Hollywood show, we are thrilled to welcome a rising star in entertainment media, Liam Crowley. Liam is an entertainment host and a reporter for Screen Rant, where he covers the worlds of film and television with sharp insight and infectious enthusiasm, especially when it comes to Percy Jackson and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As the lead for Screen Rant's East Coast event coverage, Liam has become a familiar face on red carpets and at major screenings, and he's the creative force behind the popular interview series Coffee Chats, which he executive produces and hosts. But before the press badges and the camera crews, Liam was a true fan at heart, just a kid rushing home from school in the 2010s to catch Collider Movie Talk and the movie Trivia Schmodown. That deep-rooted passion led him to pursue a degree in broadcast and digital journalism from Syracuse University, and the rest, as they say, is history. Whether he's breaking down blockbuster news or hosting one-on-one interviews with today's biggest stars, Liam brings a fresh, authentic voice to the industry. And if you ever find yourself at a premiere in New York City, just look for the tall guy in a three-piece suit and a pair of Jordan 1s. You'll know it's him. Without further ado, please welcome Liam Crowley to the Designing Hollywood show. Liam, welcome.
Robert, your check is in the mail. Oh my goodness. I think I half helped script that intro. I gave some bullet points to your producer of what I'm about, but I definitely didn't write all of it. So that was very kind. And it's funny that you mentioned, obviously, the movie talk and the schmodown of it all, because I usually wait until like the very end of a conversation with my heroes to be like, hey, by the way, I grew up on your stuff and you're very influential into pursuing what I want to pursue. But no, it's true, Robert. Like you, I remember rushing off the school bus, and I didn't do the sports centers. I didn't do, the late night TV shows. I popped on AMC Movie Talk for a while, then it became Collider Movie Talk. And then when y'all launched Heroes and Jedi Council and all that, all those shows were super, super influential to me and like me finding my passion. So it is a true honor to get to share this podcast with you today.
That's so nice of you to say. It's funny. I didn't know anything about any of that. And John Schnepp, the late great John Schnepp, who I'd been friends with for years, called me up one day and said, hey, I do this YouTube show. And we're doing this new comic book show called AMC Heroes. Why don't you come be on it? And I was like, okay. And I didn't even, other than movie trailers, I didn't even watch YouTube. So I would go in, sit down, and that's when I met John Campea. It's been 10 years. It was April of 2015. And I sit down with them, and I would do the show, and I would leave. And there was all this other hubbub of activity. There's all the other, it wasn't Collider yet, but it was still AMC and Movie Talk. But I was doing Heroes, and I didn't know much about it. I didn't watch it. So it didn't occur to me that suddenly, like, I started getting recognized and stuff. It was like, it changed my life the same way it changed yours. So it's nice to hear. I mean, but you did something respectable. You went to Syracuse University. I'm curious, like, how did you know? I mean, I think one of the interesting things about Collider and those days, and I really loved all the people that I work with, Mark Ellis and Christian Harloff. And do you see Harloff in New York?
No, and I know he lives here now, and I need to eventually hit him up on the DMs or something and just be like, hey, would love to grab a coffee, because yeah, Schmoes, man. But even before, I remember when Schmodown was in the studio before it became Collider Schmodown, when they did like
Right.
the stuff with Popcorn Talk Network.
Yeah, no, it was a wild time, but it was interesting because I didn't realize that people saw us like we were these accessible. We were fans, we were fans that were sort of forging this professional path. But I'm curious. Not a lot of people watched us and then went on to make a professional career out of it. Tell me a little bit about what convinced you, and when did you know that you wanted to get into entertainment journalism?
I think that there was such a magic back in the day, like, and I say back in the day, I mean like 10, 15 years ago, of how junkets and red carpets happened. There was such a lack of there was such a big barrier between the two. And nowadays, with social media and influencers getting more involved, it seems a lot more accessible. But back then it just felt so like this is a whole different world. And yeah, when I would watch Movie Talk, like you guys, I was like, these are like the pundits that the same way I would view anyone contributing to SportsCenter. That's how I viewed the people on Movie Talk and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I don't remember if it was a specific one junket. I remember the Avengers 2012 press tour was one I followed very closely. And to date myself a little bit, I was 11 years old when that movie was doing its round.
Yeah, that predated my involvement.
Yeah, and just like seeing the junket setting and seeing the red carpets and the international tour people would go on, I was obsessed. And I was almost more obsessed with the news behind movies more than movies themselves. I loved hearing about how castings happened and box office projections and just like how long a movie would stay in theaters and the rise of streaming and what video on demand meant before streaming and stuff like that. So I knew I always wanted to be in media, and I just didn't have the same level of enthusiasm for the local news or the politics or sports and stuff like that. And there was no clear path when it came to movies. It was always just like, just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, see what sticks. And people like Jake Hamilton, people like Kevin McCarthy, Brandon Davis, Chris Van Vliet, like all these guys who were kind of independent contractors were going around to all these different junkets. I would always just pick their brain when I was in college. I'd have some like Zoom calls with them. And yeah, I freelanced for a bunch of places in college. I worked for a site called comicbook.com for about 2.5 years out of college. And then, yeah, I joined Screen Rant last fall, and it's been a true blessing, because just like being in New York at the center of so much stuff, I've been able to, I mean, my two biggest dream interviews were Chris Evans and John Cena, and I did both of those in the month of June alone. And it's crazy to say that out loud, but a lot happens at once in this industry. But it's nice to kind of have these reflective moments and remember, at the end of the day, this is my childhood dream. It can feel like work on some days, but it's nice to reminisce a little bit and realize, I'm having fun with what I'm doing.
Yeah, and this whole entertainment news space, and the fact that we have this platform with YouTube that is global, it didn't exist 15 years ago. People weren't broadcasting live on YouTube back in 2010. And the fact that it's grown, not even just exponentially, it's grown universally, I think. And to have this kind of a platform and for you to have grown up with it is something that didn't exist 20 years ago. So you sort of have forged your own path into a new emerging industry that still is changing all the time. And what do you think the biggest, I don't know, not obstacle, but the biggest difficulty is? What is it that what do you want to bring to the space that only you could bring to the space?
Oh, what a good question. Oh, man. That only I can bring to the space. I mean, I think I have a very unique personality. I did my John Cena interview. I wore my wristbands that I got a couple of years ago. I've always been like a huge fan of wrestling and all that. Same thing with the suits I wear and stuff like that. Like I mentioned in the intro of like the Jordan ones that I collab with my like suits and stuff like that. It's something that's me. So in terms of like unique content, I mean, I love the show that I do right now called Coffee Chats. It's a show that I pitched to Screen Rant. It's been a concept I've kicked around in my brain for years. I used to like, anytime I would go to a new coffee shop, I would just like go on my Snapchat story and be like, here's my little coffee review. And wouldn't it be cool to like have a conversation with an actor over a cup of coffee one day? And they love the idea. We're able to like put a budget behind it and a production behind it. And that show is so cool because it's such a relaxed way of having an interview. Like we get to have a conversation, a dialogue. I don't even like calling my interviews anymore because it feels just like an exchange between two old friends. So I guess as I just throw a bunch of things that I like doing at you with this question, I guess the answer to it is to have more dialogues than interviews. I think that's what audiences want right now. They really want authenticity. We see it all the time with these major news organizations on TikTok or on Instagram, and that the way that they shoot these little shorts, they have the production to do a giant green screen and put in flashy graphics, but they do the DIY handheld style because they know that that's what audiences gravitate to. They gravitate to authenticity and rawness and realness. And I think that can be true from a production standpoint. That can also be true from an execution of interview standpoint. So yeah, as I word vomit here, I think that's my answer is have more dialogue focused conversations rather than traditional Q&A interviews.
I think that's 100%. I mean, that's something I learned when I was doing DVD special features, and I would do these very long form interviews with especially actors. And I think you're exactly right. Because people, look, junket interviews, well, tell me about your character. Like, the audience knows more about the characters than the actors do. They just do, especially for their franchise IPs. What people want to know is, who is this person? Who is the person behind the character on screen? What's he like or what's she like? And I think that what you're doing, the same way that Hot Wings, you know, is such a fun show to watch, where it's disarming. What was it like for you to pitch a show? Like what is the official title of the show?
Coffee Chats.
Is it not, it's not Coffee Chats with Liam? It's just called
Not
Coffee
yet.
Chats. Right.
Not yet.
but that was something that came out of you, and you pitched it and made it happen. And I think, you know, like, not unlike making an independent movie, you know, you had to go to Screen Rant. What was it like? What was that process like? What did you have to do? Did you have to write a proposal? Did you have to make some kind of a pitch deck? How were you able to convince the higher ups at Screen Rant to let you make that show?
Yeah, well, it was a very collaborative effort, and I was very fortunate that when I was brought into Screen Rant, one of the things that I was brought in with the intent to do was to launch an original series. So not only were they receptive to my pitch, they were receptive to just the prospect of a pitch. They wanted a show to be made, and fortunately, I just had something that I had, you know, like I said, developed over the course of like 5 years. And I joke, but like it honestly is the truth. Like I would go on my Snapchat and I would review these cups of coffee for my friends who didn't care. And they love to tell me, they were like, yeah, we would watch 10 seconds and then click out of it. And I was like, it's only 60 seconds. Just watch the full thing. But then I took that concept and I made it into a segment for one of my campus television shows. We had a broadcast network on Syracuse campus called Citrus TV, and our Good Morning America style show, which was called Juice and Java. They love their orange puns
right,
there.
Sure.
We would do like a coffee crawl. We were too young to do a bar crawl, so obviously I was like, what can we do? Let's go to a bunch of different coffee shops and taste test and stuff like that and have a conversation.
That's
so
great.
Basically taking those two original ideas and merging them together and being like, here's how we could do a traditional interview, but we could formulate the questions to be a lot more relaxed, a lot more like vibey, and just see where the conversation goes. If a good headline comes out of it, great, but that's never the goal. It's to just kind of have a relaxed conversation that's more back and forth than here's a long question, here's a long monologue of an answer. And yeah, the pitch process was super simple. It was just, you know, getting all of those thoughts I just gave you in one pitch doc, and then just like, here's how the show layout would go, here's how we would roll out, you know, the full 30-minute show and cut it down to maybe 15 minutes accessible for YouTube and 30 minutes of audio for a podcast. And here's what we can clip out and put on socials. And studios have been super receptive to it, which I'm very flattered by, because, you know, usually with a show like that, when it's new and it's in its infancy, you have to work your way up to pretty big guests. But we've had some pretty big names: Bryce Dallas Howard, Jack Quaid, Noah Centineo, Ben Wong, the new Karate Kid, and Gabriel Luna in the heart of when The Last of Us Season 2 was airing. And we have some big episodes in the works for the summer. So it's been nice that both in-house and out-of-house people seem very receptive to the idea. And we only want to just keep growing it. We're only 5 months into existence, and this is something that's it's my baby. So I want it to be around for many years to come.
Well, I mean, it's great too. I think that whole format, any kind of a format where you can be a little bit more casual, like you were saying, that authenticity is so important with today's audiences, especially on YouTube, because people can tell whether you're not authentic in seconds, if that, not even in less time. People just know, and I think that was a great way to go. How much did your education at Syracuse play into, like, one of the things about you that you're selling yourself? Like, one of the things that I met when I was at Collider was all of these people that were like, I didn't know Jeremy Johns as a person, and Jeremy Johns, he's been reviewing movies for like 10 years. And when you tune into him, you know what you're getting. It's him that you're turning into, you're tuning into, or streaming. And I really, really liked what he did. He has a format. He became very good at it. When you were working and learning at Syracuse, how much of the persona that you have now were you sort of developing? Maybe in the embryonic stages, now you have your signature suits, you've got your Jordan 1s. All of that must have been an evolutionary process. And was that something that your academic career taught you?
That's it's wild that you mentioned Jeremy, because he is the first person I found in this space. I've never met him, I've never had a conversation with him, but I remember his early movie reviews of just like, and that really influenced me.
He's a great guy.
I mean, yeah, I believe you when you say that, because of how authentic he is in his videos. It doesn't seem like there's any real separation of who you see on screen versus who he is in person. Yeah, that's a really good question, because I definitely feel like I've become more authentically myself the further away I got from college. And what I mean by that is Syracuse is very it's a great school and a great program, but they want to mold you into a very standard newscaster, and use your broadcaster voice. And that's just never been me. Like I have a certain enunciation I use in my junket interviews and red carpet interviews, but it's still the same voice and the same colloquial diction that I would use when I'm talking to my friends, because I feel like that is authentically me. And I use the same body language and stuff like that. And so definitely in those first couple years from 18 to 20, I was very impressionable in terms of here's the style that people like, and you don't want to step on any toes. But as you get more comfortable in your skin now, as you get more confident, you start to embrace the things that make you you. And so I really don't have too much of a difference between the Liam Crowley on camera and the Liam Crowley that just goes about my day and goes rock climbing in my free time and stuff like that. I don't have too many interests outside of the media space. It's hard because it's I love movies and TV, both on and off my job and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been easy to develop my voice, especially with a company that really supports me for me. I've never had feedback of we didn't like that suit, or we didn't like your hair, or something like that. We don't like the way you asked that question. It's always just been yeah, continue to be you, because it's what works. And so yeah, it's been easier the more I separate from college. And I will say too, I don't want to ever rag on my alma mater. Syracuse has been so good to me, and definitely unlocked something within me that I don't think I would have unlocked had I not had the college experience and all that, of just going through those reps. But I attribute way more of my professional growth to the things I did outside of the classroom. I had my traditional broadcast classes, and those were fine, but the Citrus TV of it all, the campus news station where I got to make broadcast content that is by the boys for the boys. I was working with other students, and there was no professor supervising us. It was just a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds putting together these news broadcasts that honestly rivaled some local news networks. We covered the 2020 election, and we did a 3.5-hour live news broadcast covering a presidential election while we were all COVID masked up in a pandemic.
Wow.
If you don't learn something from that, your brain is not open. Those moments, I feel, made me into who I am today, way more than oh, here's your reporter story and it's due on Friday and make it 400 words. It's those in the field moments that shape you into who you are.
I totally agree with you. I love hearing you say that, but still, you had to be at Syracuse to have that experience. And I think one of the things that I learned, before I went to USC, I went to I used to call it a crunchy, chewy granola. I was born in the 60s, the Evergreen State College in Washington State. There was a student uprising back there in 2017. But it didn't have so much. It had all this equipment. It had all this material that you could do. We started what was called Community Artists Television. And at the time, it was on a local public access station where we would make short films every week. And it was really pretentious college art crap. But we were still doing it, and it was something that we did. And we had to be at school to do it, and you'd meet other students. But I think that's what you did it's a combination of the two, because you get a foundational traditional journalism, the underpinnings of all that. But at the same time, you're off with other students making stuff. And that's kind of the great function, I think, of the modern age, is that we have all of this incredible technology that didn't exist 15 years ago. So you can hone your craft. So it's great to hear that you had the wherewithal and the gumption to get up and do that, because I think so many people think it's just going to come to them. Like, one day I'm just going to walk through a door and I will be whatever it is I want to be. And I've always found the exact opposite is true. You've got to go make yourself into that. Well, now, that same with your show that you do now and working at Screen Rant, do you feel constrained in terms of what you're able to do, or because you love movies and television and the MCU and Percy Jackson and things like that, do you see that you have a lot of room to grow and change? Because, like you said, you covered a presidential election. Maybe you want to do something beyond covering entertainment. Is there something where do you see yourself in 20 years?
It's a good question, Rob, because where do we see the industry in 20 years?
Man.
Like, I hope theaters are still around in 20 years. I hope AI doesn't replace all of Google and stuff like that. It's hard to think of myself in those moments, because the direction of the industry as a whole. But no, honestly, like, every new title I get to cover provides a new just like breadth of like creative fulfillment. Like, growing up watching movies, I liked a lot of different genres, of course, but like, I never dabbled in horror. And last year I got to cover Longlegs, and I would have never touched that movie had it not been assigned to me. And it just reinvigorated a lot of different creative juices. Like, this week I did both Jurassic World and Megan 2.0. They couldn't be more different of films. And they both satisfy a different kind of creative itch. So yeah, as the months and years go on, I want to continue to do more like unique content. Like, I really we did an interview with Logic recently that was in promotion of this new movie he has called Paradise Records. And he's a rapper. He had never done films before, but we were able to shoot that interview in a separate studio with like a white backdrop and very casual. And I stumbled on the intro, and he jutted in and he was like, "No, leave that in. Like, we gotta do this raw. We gotta show people that, like, even if you stumble, it's okay." And I appreciated that, because it was a unique form of conversation. So yeah, I just want to continue to innovate with content, and it will always be in the entertainment space. I mean, I love professional wrestling, and that is also like kind of a branch of entertainment. I will never do politics. I will probably never do sports. But yeah, I want to just continue, I don't know, being me. I want to do a lot more hosting, that's for sure. I did my first hosting earlier this month. Yeah, it was June 1st. I hosted an early screening of 28 Years Later, and then did a live Q&A with Danny Boyle, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Jodie Comer.
Wow.
And to sit in those chairs in front of an audience of 300 people and have like a 15-minute conversation and work closely with the studio, like that really fired me up. And yeah, so I guess the next dream, the next bucket list goal is to host a Comic-Con panel. And New York Comic-Con's in October, and I'll be knocking on those doors. We'll see how receptive studios are to certain panels and stuff like that. But I would love to continue to do more live atmosphere work. It's there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Perry Nemiroff was at Collider, obviously, and she's gone on and really done a wonderful job becoming a great entertainment journalist, and also she hosts a lot of live events and then does great interviews as well. So I could see absolutely, and there's a lot of, I think people that once a studio knows you and knows the kind of questions you ask and how you interact with people, they'll gravitate toward you based on what you're able to do. And I think that's great, because nowadays boring junket interviews the way they used to be, those are a thing of the past. Those are literally dinosaurs. And if you're going to cover Jurassic World Rebirth, you have to do something, like you said, be more yourself, more you, because that's what you're selling now. You want, and it's weird because in becoming a journalist, you also become a celebrity in your own right, which is sort of a weird, it's a weird thing. You're trying to cover celebrities, but you don't want to ever overshadow the very people, because you're going to have young people watching you, and they're going to feel the same way about you that you felt about someone like Jeremy Jahns. And that's just a function of what happens here. Well, let me ask you this. Obviously, I want to celebrate entertainment, because that's what we do on this show. But obviously AI is looming, and I'd like to believe that people will always want to watch great entertainment made by human beings. AI will probably assist, but I don't want to live in a world where everything is AI generated from soup to nuts. But how do you feel about the industry right now? How do you feel about, like, Percy Jackson and the MCU, some of your favorite IPs? How do you feel about IP storytelling? How do you think we're doing? How is the industry doing?
I'm scared, Rob. I am scared a little bit, I have to admit. I will say, anytime a movie succeeds, I'm overjoyed. Like, people were coming to me asking about, Lilo and Stitch being like basically a shot-for-shot remake of the animated movie. And they're like, oh, why was this worth making? And I just point to the box office. I'm pretty sure it's already crossed $1 billion. I'm like, that's why, because that movie making so much money, a rising tide lifts all ships. And so it makes me feel easier when, like, that movie was made by Disney, and then, like, 20th Century, I believe, made The Amateur, but also under the Disney banner. And I don't think The Amateur did amazing, but, like, as long as something's making profit and the studio's making profit, it's good for everyone. And so original movies like Sinners and Materialists being really good original stories, that makes me want to fight even harder to get people to see those in theaters and stuff like that. There's a really good movie I saw at South by earlier this year called American Sweatshop. And if you haven't seen it, the basic premise is it deals with people who their job all day is to watch videos that get flagged on social media and approve whether or not they get deleted. And so they're watching the most horrific stuff. Like, there's obviously a lot of pornography, but there's like beheadings and crazy violence and stuff like that. And a lot of people who work this job, they quit after a couple months because it's an insane task. And
is this a narrative feature or is it a documentary?
It's a narrative, but I'm pretty sure this job exists.
Oh no, it does somewhere. Absolutely, because I've heard about this movie. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's really good. Lily Reinhart is the lead, and then the director, I forget her name, but she did some episodes of Severance season 2, so she's really good with this kind of stuff. But anyways, there's a line in that movie that I'll never forget that says, like, why not just get an AI to do this job? And it's well, the AI can't differentiate the human reaction. And basically, like, these people who are quitting after a couple months because they're just going home, they're getting sick, they're having nightmares, the line is that they're paying us for our empathy. And that's something that I don't think AI can ever replace, is the empathetic nature of a human touch when it comes to artistic work and all that. And so, I mean, I see all the clips on TikTok, they're getting hyper realistic, and AI has only been around publicly for like a couple of years. So
it's insane.
I'm sure we'll get to a point where, geez, I don't know, the post-production process could be super quick. And I empathize a lot because a lot of people, I worry about jobs getting consolidated. And, the entertainment industry, something that I always tell my friends, because some people just don't get it. Some people who don't work in the industry don't get it. And if you work in the entertainment industry, you took a huge gamble on yourself. You took a huge risk. You didn't take the safe way out. You didn't do what your parents probably told you to do and get the high paying desk job. You did something that you are super passionate about. And the idea that machinery can just replace that has always felt wrong to me. Fortune favors the bold, and I believe the people that make a success of themselves deserve to reap those rewards, or maybe not make a success of themselves, but the people who take that leap and work at it, like Chris Evans's character John in Materialist. He deserves to be a success story because of all the work he put in. And the idea of being at mile 26.1 and then right before you cross the finish line being like, sorry, this AI is going to take your job, it's wrong to me. So I mean, we can't stop the evolution of something like that, but we can put restrictions and regulations on it. And I pray that humanity is valued more than ease and profitability. History has not been too kind to that, but this does seem like something that needs to be regulated, or else it's going to affect a lot of people's livelihoods.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And I've stayed sort of in the independent film space. I've been working in I was a PA on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, a long time ago, and it never occurred to me to think that the entire industry, like, you could AI generate not just people but an entire environment. Like, everything that you see in an AI generated image are jobs. Like when you see a set, and it's not a set, it's a recreation of a real place. So you can do things with AI that making movies you can't do. Like you can set people up and shoot them in any direction or shoot them. And it's going to be a really interesting thing if we as human beings, my whole interest is going to be in the perception. Are we going to eventually, is AI going to get so good that we just can't tell the difference? Like if we have somebody who's, and I think writing as well, like people who are great writers, you can use AI, you could make your own sitcom, but you as a human being would write it all the witticism would come from you to the point where eventually AI will learn to be as witty as you are, and then it'll just be a self-perpetuating loop. But are we going to want to do that? Are we going to want to watch things that are completely AI generated? And that's what I wonder. Are we going to reach a point where there's a singularity of whether AI develops its own, well, if it's sentient, the singularity happens, what's going to happen to us, to humanity? Because storytelling itself is us reflecting back on what it means to be human. And if you have something that isn't human making our stories for us, where does that leave us? I think the soul is gone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see.
I honestly.
But until then, entertainment, journalism, and do you see it, since you've been doing it, are there trends and things that are changing, or has it been pretty straightforward? Are studios, they're looking for more innovative ways to promote their product, like your own show? Do you see more of that happening? How do you see the industry developing in the next, say, 5 years?
Ooh, yeah, the next 5 years, I mean, I think there'll continue to be exponential growth. There's no clear linear path. It usually just kind of swoops up like crazy. Because if we look at the past 5 years, even pre-pandemic, I was having a conversation with a couple people in hospitality at the Jurassic World's junket, and they were telling me about how they were a part of the ground zero of virtual junkets. And I'm like, that's crazy to me, because that was only 5 years ago.
Right.
And junket, like JPI and Glass Engine, they had never even experimented with the Zoom junket. And my first junkets for the first 3 years of my career were all virtual. And so I didn't know any other difference. So as we continue to move forward, I mean, I see a lot when emails come to me of save the dates and invites. There's a lot of lines about like, let us know if we have any specialty concepts and stuff like that. And so there definitely does seem to be a more interest in doing innovative ways of press. And I think that's essential in order to stay as close to ahead of the curve as possible. Because I think for someone like me, like my generation, I don't like to say like, oh, I'm so young and I know all the trendy stuff. But it's easier for me because I still have peers who are in college and my social circles are still very, on the pulse of pop culture. And I do honestly feel myself, as the days and weeks go on, feeling more distant from what is like hip and trendy. And so while I still have like my finger on the pulse of it, I want to stay ahead of the curve, and I never want to be super reactionary, because I do see some brands out there doing concepts today that I'm like, this would have been a great pitch 2 years ago.
Right.
And you might get 4 to 6 months of life out of it now, but in 4 to 6 months, something new is going to come along. And when that new thing comes along, you got to be on top of it. Even if it's just the way, it doesn't even have to be a new concept. It could just be the way you cut video. Like those social clips that you'll see on Instagram Reels and TikTok of like the vertical video of an interview clip. I had been doing those in college. I could dig up old ones from 2020 from a podcast I did. And now every single brand has them. And now that every brand has them, you got to figure out a way to make yours stand out, because now you have competition from accounts with millions of followers. So whether it be more jump cuts or flashy edits, or even just being authentic with how you're presenting the information. One of the clips that I had go viral from my materialist coverage was I just brought my notes. I took notes during the press screening and I showed them to Celine's song, and people were like going over the moon from that. And I was like, it wasn't the fanciest editing. It was very just real, raw, authentic.
Yeah.
It was technically before the interview even started, but little things like that. You should never want to script authenticity. I didn't go into that junket being like, oh, I'll show my notes and this will get a good viral clip out of it. But when I see the reaction from that, I'm like, okay, so maybe I lean more into the things that genuinely interest me rather than the things that, oh, well, this would do numbers because this is in the title or something like that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I was saying for years that authenticity is the currency of the 21st century, and it's weird when people quote it back to me, but I think you're absolutely right, because the thing is, and I'm sure Celine's song really appreciated that you had taken these notes and you really paid attention to her work and had more insightful things to say, because everyone's trying to chase these things that they don't really know what they are. Like they've been told, well, you have to have these and you have to have these and you have to have these, and you really don't. Especially when you're selling yourself, when you are what you're selling, in addition to what you're promoting. And I think that was a great move. It doesn't surprise me that clip went viral. But now let me ask you this. Being that you're still in touch with people in college and things like that, I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I see us drifting away more and more. Like when I was growing up, movies were the important thing. They were the art form of the 20th century. They were all I was interested in. And to me, they were the greatest art form that had ever been created. But that was before user-generated content came to dominate the world. And we didn't have that. And now movies essentially make us look out to art, to contemplate things. But now we've kind of turned the cameras on ourselves and we're looking inward back at one another for meaning. Do you think that movies will have a place in the 21st century moving forward? Or will there be a time when it's mostly going to be virtual worlds and we're going to be interacting with each other as opposed to looking at art like film?
It's a really good question. And, I think of one of my friends sent me this a couple months ago, and he was like, why does it feel terrible when I feel accomplished for watching a movie? And it's like, because back in the day, like movies were our escape in terms of entertainment. And now all day we're scrolling on our phones. We're getting this like short form content on the regular. And that when you sit down and immerse yourself in a 2-hour story, you feel the same feeling you would feel of accomplishment that you would feel if you sat down and read a book for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You feel like more intellectual watching a movie today than, you would maybe 20 years ago. Not to say it wasn't intellectual to watch a movie back then, but it's a different kind of escape. And so, yeah, I mean, the box office doesn't lie in terms of that there's still obviously a huge demand for certain blockbusters, and also streaming numbers are crazy. And there's shows that I never would have anticipated being a hit that then the data comes out and you're like, wow, no, there's still a huge demand for it. I think there will always be a place for long form entertainment in our world.
I hope so.
But I do think it will continue to just just evolve. And I hope we never get to a place where the only things in theaters are giant IP, like box office juggernauts. I hope we still can get, a Sinners, a Materialists, some of the indie films that go to South by and eventually get a theatrical release, because there really is nothing like that experience. I was at the Jurassic World premiere as well on Monday, and I had that moment where, this is obviously a job at the end of the day, and I'm assigned to be there, and there's oftentimes you can forget of like, this is a pinch me moment. And when I'm in this theater and the first time the John Williams score hits, which is not really a spoiler, it's in the trailer, it's a Jurassic World movie, of course it's going to be the John Williams score. The first time that John Williams score hit and I heard it on this Dolby surround sound, I was taken away. Like my breath just like, I stopped writing notes for a second. I looked up and I was like, oh my God, what a beautiful thing it is to be alive and to experience things like this. And you can't get that at home. You can't get that on your TV or your laptop. So I think for as long as people remember how special it is to go to the theater, because even if you're someone who goes to the theater twice a year, everyone has a core memory associated with seeing a movie in a theater. And for that reason, I hope people will keep that at the forefront of their mind whenever tides continue to turn.
Yeah, and I do think that still, look, we had cultural moments like Top Gun Maverick. I never would have thought that movie would have made, as much as I was excited for it, because Top Gun's always been a part of my life since it came out. But to see that movie was able to do as well as it did, that everybody turned out for it, or what happened with Barbenheimer, these two movies that couldn't have been more different, but they turned into this cultural zeitgeist moment where people were getting dressed up and puzzling over it, and suddenly people are talking about Robert Oppenheimer. I wouldn't have thought that would have happened, and that Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig could have made a Barbie movie that actually had something to say, and that was a lot of fun to see movies again. I mean, I grew up with lots of cultural IP events, whether it was Star Wars or something like that, but especially as a kid of the 80s, man, everything that came out was like an event that became a cultural moment. Everybody went and saw E.T. Everybody went and saw Back to the Future. Not everybody went and saw like Reanimator, which is a horror movie, but my friends did, and there was all these moments that you remember. I remember seeing RoboCop in the theater for the first time. We all made fun of it because it was called RoboCop, and how could that movie be? And then you walked out of the theater going, oh my God, that was awesome. And do you still think that movies, I mean, look, Sinners kind of had that. A lot of people were going and were surprised by Sinners. And like you said, Celine Song's The Materialists. And I think that we are going to get Zach Kreger's Weapons that opens in August. He made Barbarian. It's his second movie. I think we're going to get something pretty special there. But I think that studios know that original visions are just as important. At least I'd hope they would.
Yeah, and I mean, an original vision can work if you go into it with an appropriate budget, of course, but also
right.
Like a real fire behind the marketing. Obviously, the best marketing is good word of mouth. Just make a good movie, and people will encourage audiences to go out and see it. But yeah, Sinners had one of the best marketing campaigns I've ever seen, because they just knew that they had something special, and they were so aggressive with making sure people were aware that it exists and aware that they were missing out if they don't go and see it. And yeah, it's funny too, because sometimes I think about how much content we have right now and how accessible it all is. And sometimes when you have the option of everything, you choose nothing because it's all right there, right? And it's like there's something magic about when you're flipping the channels 10, 15 years ago and, Captain America, the Winter Soldier's on FX. Let me stay here for a minute because when's the next time I'm going to get the chance to watch it? And I've had Disney Plus for 5 years, and I think I've watched Winter Soldier maybe once, and it's my favorite MCU movie. It's just because I have the accessibility. And so I think I wish we could scale back the accessibility of entertainment, because it would make it more special, and it would also encourage more people to go out and make an event of it. I remember bringing 9 of my friends to go see The Martian back in 2015, and I would have to drag 1 or 2 people out by their hands and knees to go to the theater to see something like The Martian. Not that The Martian is an amazing movie. It's an amazing book by Andy Weir, but it's not the movie that you have to see in theaters. People would just go, oh yeah, I'll just wait for streaming for that. And so the fact that 10 years ago, I could rattle up a bunch of 14-year-olds and be like, we're going to see The Martian, and they were excited about it. Well, today it's like a friend will text me every now and then and be like, oh, what's good on Netflix? I got a couple of days on the weekend. Oh, yeah, I'll check this out. Yeah, I stopped watching after 30 minutes. I wasn't really interested. And I'm like, come on, you didn't even get to the second act. Like you didn't give it a chance. So yeah, I think if people, I will never get a reduced amount of accessibility to entertainment. Streaming is always going to be here. But I think if people are more just like conscious of like the regulations you put on yourself. Like I have timers on my social media. I only listen to certain playlists on certain days because I want them to stay special.
Right.
Like I still want art to feel special and elicit the emotion it had on me 10, 15 years ago. And that comes with a bit of responsibility. It's, you know, it's the Spider-Man quote, but with great power, you know, you got all this power of all these different options. You got to hold yourself in check. You got to be a little responsible if they're still going to give you that same childlike wonder that you had, you know, way back when.
And I still think it can. I mean, and one of the things that I've also been fascinated by is how people are starting, like you were talking about, cutting up movies and putting famous parts of movies as like 90-second chunks on Instagram Reels. And I'm like, oh, I got to go back and watch that again. Like I'll sit and watch those 90-second clips. And another thing, this recent trend of making infant videos, like taking scenes from movies and creating them with babies, like with AI. I mean, I have to tell you, one of my favorite ones of those was from Sinners, when one of the characters is trying to they're all at the front doorstep, and he's like, yeah, I'd like to, just let me in, let me come in. And the girl's like, why you got to do that? You know, why you got to ask? Why do you got to ask about that? You've been coming in and out of here every day. And she goes, it's because you're dead. And it was done as those babies, you know, and I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, because it hadn't come out on video yet. It hadn't come out on VOD. It hasn't come out on physical media. And it just reminded me, like, I got to see Sinners again. So this little baby, you know, this AI baby generated, it's the scene from the movie with their voices, but it's those, even that made me think to myself, I got to go watch Sinners again. And it was such a weird, I mean, I thought to myself, what a weird way to get me to want to watch Sinners again, to watch this scene that I loved in the movie. I've seen the movie 3 times in the theater. And I love this particular scene. I love the acting in that scene, but to see it done and rendered as infant AI babies just made me wanted to see it again. And I'm like, that's some strange marketing, but it's working on me. So asymmetric marketing, I guess you could call it. But yeah, and it's the same thing with movies. They're cutting movies up into chunks, which is against everything I believe in. But then I'll see a scene from a movie that's 20 years old going, oh, I got to go see that again. And then it makes me like, you know, do a Google search. Where is that movie playing? Do I own it in my own collection? Where can I see it? And I've been doing that more and more. And again, asymmetric marketing. Do you see, if you could talk to anybody, who is your dream interview?
It was Chris Evans. It's humbling to have checked that box off. And I still would love to have, like, you know, that was a 5-minute junket slot, and he was paired with Dakota Johnson. So, you know, we addressed Marvel very briefly, but like I would love to, you know, get into his psyche about, you know, the phone calls he had with Downey way back when, of like why he didn't want to take it on at first. And I'm a Boston guy, and so it'd be cool to kind of just talk about growing up in Massachusetts and what kind of entertainment you were exposed to as a kid, because a lot of Bostonians tend to get the typical like circuit of the Mystic Rivers and stuff like that. And The Departed obviously came out while he was in the business, and the same with The Town. But obviously, so an extended chat with Chris would still be really cool. Next on the list, honestly, just because when we talk about like relatability of like what's hip and who's on the scene right now, I really want to talk to Chalamet. Like, I just think what he's doing right now is so impressive. I love his SAG speech about pursuing greatness.
Oh, I thought that was great too.
Yeah, because just like, it's true. He put 5.5 years into bringing Bob Dylan to life, learning guitar on the set of Dune. Like, here's a guy that, like, you know, people, anytime you get to a certain level of success, you're going to have your naysayers and your critics, but he's someone who truly, truly cares about the craft of filmmaking. And he's very, very meticulous when it comes to selecting his projects. And he's now at a point in his career where, you know, he did all the indie films for so long, but now he has brought the Paul Atreides and the Willy Wonkas of the world to the big screen, and the Bob Dylans, and he still finds himself lost in all these characters. And he's able to maintain this like rabid Knicks fandom, and he knows all about college football, and he's quoting Soulja Boy in certain interviews. And I'm like, he's someone who like has the pop culture understanding of the world like me, yet he's this like thespian of the 1800s that we don't get anymore. So
Renaissance
he
man,
would
a
be,
modern Renaissance
yeah,
man.
he'd be a really cool conversation. And then also Tom Cruise, because that audio of him, the leaked audio on, what was it, the Mission Impossible set, about, you know, making sure people were masked up. I would love to have just a full conversation just about that production, because I credit him so much, like so many other people, with saving our industry. The gamble he took with saving Top Gun Maverick for theaters when Paramount really wanted it to go to streaming, and his urgency to get people back employed and make these big budget films. And just the fact that he's showing up to the Sinners red carpet and the F1 red carpet, like, people joke, but he does feel like the president of movies. And I love his enthusiasm. And I would love to not even talk about of making movies, but just the enthusiasm behind keeping the business alive from a different standpoint.
I was lucky in the sense that I was going to a screening. This was back in 2009, I think. I ended up in a situation where I talked to him for an hour because we both got to this screening of his movie Valkyrie that Bryan Singer directed, and he came. The time was changed, so we both showed up an hour early, and so I literally got to talk to him once he understood that I was not a crazy person or anything like that. We talked movies for an hour, and it was one of the most engaging. I've often thought maybe you could be the one to do this, that somebody should sit down with Tom Cruise and go through his entire filmography. Like maybe coffee chats with Cruise, the Cruise coffee chats, and do it like when David Frost was interviewing Richard Nixon, you know, and do a series, because you could probably be the guy to do it, where you could go through his entire filmography, because he has so much interesting perspective, and he's so enthusiastic about it that I could see you getting that interview. And the more I know people probably want to tie in the interviews with you in terms of promoting something that's coming out. But it'd be interesting to see you push more to get long-form interviews with people that don't necessarily have something coming out. Like go back to a Chris Evans and figure out, I know you have to deal with publicists and go through Screen Rant and all that, but I would suggest trying to expand and go, like this interview that I'm doing with you right now. You know, it's not necessarily tied to anything in particular, but nor is a lot of the people that we get on Designing Hollywood are just people that who have time. Hopefully we can tie them into something that's coming out, but for the most part, talking to people in the entertainment business, if they're not promoting something, then you really get them. They're more clear-headed. They're always thinking, oh, I've got to say this or I can't say that. But if you can just get them and disarm them and sit down and shoot those coffee conversations, that could be really, really interesting. And, you know, you should start just calling up people randomly, calling up their publicists going, hey, I'd love to talk to this person because of this. I know it's not related to anything, but if they're around, you know, maybe do that.
Yeah, no, it's a great pitch. And honestly, I had a conversation briefly with John Watts. Obviously he directed all the Spider-Man MCU movies, and he's got a bunch of other cool stuff coming out. And I remember having a conversation with him at an after party and mentioning, you know, I got this show Coffee Chats and it's going on. I was like, yeah, just, you know, I was like, let me know, you know, when you got something coming out, we can figure it out. He's like, why? Like, we could just do it whenever. And I was like, okay, yeah, if you're up for that. He's like, I live in New York. It's easy enough. So again, that's not official confirmation. John Watts on Coffee Chats. We'll have to fine tune scheduling at some point. But yeah, that little anecdote is evidence that you're right. You know, it's people like to talk any time of the year, and it's nice when you don't have to navigate a lot of responses back to the project you're working on, especially when they're offshoot question topics and stuff like that.
And I've only heard great things about him in terms of being conversationalist. A friend of mine interviewed him for his book that recently came out, and I think he probably would have a lot to say, because you've got now Skeleton Crew and talk about Cop Car and all those movies. Well, let me ask you this: I can't believe we've been talking for an hour. This is great. Yeah. You know, coming out of Syracuse, there's a lot of people that want to become, I mean, influencers is like the number one thing that kids today say they want to be when they grow up. But you actually are, I would say, self-made, you know. What advice could you give to the next you, or somebody that wants to get into the YouTube space, or somebody who wants to get into journalism? What would you tell them?
It's a really good question, and this answer has evolved dramatically over the past, I don't know, just like chunks of 6 months because the industry keeps changing. I always tell people to be very, very intentional with what you want early on, as early as possible. It is very hard to give my blueprint to someone who is 30 and trying to make a career pivot because, when I first started and I was in college, at the end of the day, I didn't care about how much I was getting paid. I just wanted a byline. I just wanted to be able to
Sure.
Google my name and know that articles would pop up, and that meant the world to me. And I eventually got to a point where, like, yeah, I paid all my dues while I could afford to do so, and now you can like support yourself with your dream job. And it's hard to dedicate a lot of time to this career if you are simultaneously trying to raise a family and you're in your beginning stages and stuff like that. So not to discourage anyone from pivoting, but just like if you want this and you want it and you're young and you're debating whether or not you should go the safe route, I would always say fortune favors the bold and go in on your dream. If you're at that stage of I don't know what to do in college, if this is something you're interested in, go all in on it, and you will be rewarded for pursuing it while you're young. And also too, there's another great quote. I love to dish out these quotes where it's like, if you think the price of winning is high, just wait till you get the bill from regret. And if you don't go all in on something that you want, you'll always ask what if, and you never want to be that person who asks what if. Other thing I would say is maximize your minutes. Every now and then you'll get a huge opportunity that will come around once every 6 months to a year. And even if you only get 4 minutes with it, knock those 4 minutes out of the park. Do something that is going to make a stamp, and be very, very, I don't want to say self-congratulatory, but closed mouths don't get fed. And I know for a fact that my social media presence has helped connect me with some really great people. And my social media presence is authentic to me. And over the course of building it for 5 to 10 years, it has like a decent following, but it's all because I continue to just do what works for me. And I feel like I had another piece of advice. Yeah, maximize your minutes is one of the biggest ones, because I remember that's advice that was passed down from, like, I don't know how it got back to me. It was advice from John Cena that he said to a young wrestler, and then I interviewed that young wrestler and I kind of flipped it because I was going through a bit of a career crossroads. And I think that sums up a lot of it. But
No, that was great advice.
I'll say quickly, there's no clear path, and you always have to be pretty tunnel visioned of, like, if this is what you want, don't let the industry push you in any other direction. Because Syracuse, or just broadcast school in general, all my professors looked at me like I had 3 heads when I said I was going to go take my career into digital entertainment media. They were like, but you're so good at local news reporting. And I was like, yeah, but that's not what I want to do. And I've had friends who are very talented people that end up getting pigeonholed into becoming an associate producer at a local station in Arkansas. And then, every year they get a little bit of a raise bump, and next thing you know, you blink and you're 35 and you've settled down. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, but if your goal at 20 was to be the next Ryan Seacrest and you never even gave yourself the chance to do so, you're going to live with that bill from regret. So if any time the industry tries to push you in one way and you just stay tunnel visioned and say, like, no, this is what I want to be, it'll work out for you. It's worked out for me, and I'm not talented. I just refused to be complacent, I guess.
Well, Liam, I mean, I will leave it there. That is what a great bit of advice. I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be on Designing Hollywood. It's great to have you back. And, I wish you the best. I can't wait to follow your career, like Palpatine, with great interest. No, I think it's terrific. And thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. For real, like, you're one of a select few that have inspired me and helped pave the way. So even if you didn't sign up to be an associate producer on my career, you're getting a credit in there somewhere.
Well, thank you very much. I'll take it. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so all socials is just at Liam T. Crowley. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, most active on Instagram. And then, all my interviews live on Screen Rant. So if you go to Screen Rant's YouTube channel, which is Screen Rant Plus on YouTube, and keep it locked to like Screen Rant social channels as well. It's where you'll get all the cool snippets in clip form. So at Screen Rant on all socials. Got some big stuff coming out in the summer. I'm very proud of an extended chat I had with Gareth Edwards for Jurassic World that should be dropping next week. So that's next on the horizon. And like I said, coffee chats every month. It's kind of random when we drop them because we drop them as we get them.
Yeah.
But we got some good guests coming out in the summer. So go support the ones that already exist and keep the notifications on for the ones that come out in July.
Well, Liam Crowley, thank you so much for being on the Designing Hollywood Show.
Thanks, Robert.
A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from the John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.